The wedding dress was torn and bloodied when Kade Ryerson first saw the woman stumbling through the sagebrush outside San Bernardino, California. Her veil tangled in her dark hair like spider webs caught in a storm. He had been tracking a lost calf for the better part of the afternoon, the August heat of 1878 beating down mercilessly on the desert landscape, when movement near the rocky outcropping caught his attention. At first he thought it might be a mountain lion or a bear, but as he urged his horse closer, he realized it was a woman, and she was in trouble. Her white dress stood out against the brown earth like a beacon, the fabric shredded along one side, exposing a bloodied leg beneath. She was barefoot, her feet cut and bleeding, and she moved with the desperation of someone being chased by demons, real or imagined. Kade dismounted quickly, his boots hitting the ground with purpose as he approached her slowly, hands raised to show he meant no harm. She spun toward him, her green eyes wild with fear and exhaustion, her face streaked with dust and tears. She could not have been more than 22 or 23 years old, with delicate features that spoke of gentler circumstances than whatever had brought her to this desolate place. "Easy now," Kade said softly, his voice the same calm tone he used with spooked horses. "I am not going to hurt you. My name is Kade Ryerson. I work the ranch just north of here." The woman swayed on her feet, and he could see she was at the very edge of collapse. Her lips were cracked and dry, her skin flushed with heat and dehydration. She tried to speak, but only a hoarse whisper emerged. "Water," she managed. Kade was at her side in 3 long strides, catching her as her knees buckled. He lowered her gently to the ground in the shade of a Joshua tree and retrieved his canteen from his saddle. She drank greedily when he held it to her lips, and he had to pull it away to keep her from making herself sick. "Slow now," he cautioned. "Just small sips." She nodded, her hands trembling as they wrapped around the canteen. He noticed the wedding ring on her left hand, a simple gold band that caught the sunlight. His eyes traveled back to the ruined wedding dress, and questions flooded his mind, but he kept them to himself for the moment. Right now she needed care, not an interrogation. "Can you ride?" he asked. "My ranch is about 5 miles from here. You need proper tending and you need to get out of this heat." She looked up at him, and for the first time he saw something beyond fear in her eyes. There was a deep sadness there, a weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion. "Where am I?" she asked, her voice still rough. "About 10 miles east of San Bernardino," he replied. "In California. Do you know how you got here?" She closed her eyes, and a single tear tracked through the dust on her cheek. "I ran. I just kept running until I could not run anymore." Kade felt anger stir in his chest, though he kept it from his face. He had seen enough in his 30 years to know that a woman did not end up alone in the desert in a wedding dress unless something had gone terribly wrong. "Who was chasing you?" he asked quietly. "My husband," she whispered. "Or the man who was supposed to be my husband. I do not know anymore. I do not know anything anymore." He wanted to press for more information, but he could see she was fading fast. The heat, the dehydration, the trauma of whatever she had endured, it was all catching up with her. "Come on," he said gently, helping her to her feet. "Let us get you somewhere safe. You can tell me everything later." She nodded weakly, and he lifted her onto his horse before mounting behind her. She slumped against his chest, too exhausted to hold herself upright, and he wrapped one arm around her waist to keep her steady as he turned the horse toward home. The ride back to the ranch seemed to take forever, though in reality it was less than an hour. The woman drifted in and out of consciousness, occasionally murmuring words he could not quite make out. He kept his horse at a steady walk, not wanting to jostle her too much, and watched the horizon for any sign of pursuit. If her husband or whoever had done this to her was out looking, Cade would see them coming from a long way off, and he would be ready. The Ryerson ranch was modest by some standards, but it was honest work and honest land. Cade had inherited it from his father 5 years ago, and he had worked hard to build it into something sustainable. He ran cattle and horses, and he had a small but loyal crew of ranch hands who helped with the day-to-day operations. The main house was a sturdy structure of adobe and timber, built to withstand the harsh desert climate, with a wide porch that provided shade during the hottest parts of the day. As he rode into the yard, his foreman, an older man named Dutch, looked up from the corral where he was working with a young horse. Dutch's eyes widened when he saw the woman in Cade's arms, but to his credit, he did not waste time with questions. "Get Rosa," Cade called out. "Tell her I need hot water, clean bandages, and whatever medicine she has." Dutch nodded and hurried toward the bunkhouse where Rosa, the ranch cook and housekeeper, lived with her husband Miguel, one of Cade's best hands. Within minutes, Rosa was bustling into the main house, her round face creased with concern as Cade carried the woman inside and laid her on his own bed. "Dios mío," Rosa breathed, crossing herself as she took in the state of the woman's dress and injuries. "What happened to her?" "I do not know yet," Cade replied. "She was wandering in the desert. I think she has been out there for at least a day, maybe more." Rosa immediately took charge, shooing Cade out of the room so she could tend to the woman properly. He retreated to the front room, pacing like a caged animal as he heard Rosa moving about, heard the soft murmurs as she spoke soothingly to her patient. Dutch appeared in the doorway, hat in hand. "You want me to ride into town, boss? Get the sheriff," Cade considered this. "Not yet. Let us find out what happened first. If she was running from someone, the last thing she might need is the law getting involved before she is ready." Dutch nodded slowly. "You think someone hurt her?" "I think someone did more than hurt her," Cade said grimly. "I think someone terrified her so badly she nearly killed herself trying to get away." It was nearly dark when Rosa finally emerged from the bedroom, wiping her hands on her apron. Her expression was troubled. "She is resting now," Rosa reported. "I cleaned and bandaged her feet, and she has some bruising on her arms and ribs, but nothing broken. She drank more water and ate a little broth. Mostly, she needs rest and time to heal." "Did she say anything?" Cade asked. "Only one thing," Rosa said quietly. "She told me her name is Rebecca." "Rebecca Winters. Rebecca Winters." Cade rolled the name around in his mind, committing it to memory. "Thank you, Rosa. I appreciate your help." "She is a sweet girl," Rosa said, "but there is a deep sadness in her eyes. Whatever happened to her, it broke something inside." After Rosa left, Cade sat on the porch in the gathering darkness, listening to the sounds of the desert night. Coyotes called in the distance, and somewhere an owl hooted softly. He thought about Rebecca Winters in her torn wedding dress, about the fear in her eyes and the wedding ring on her finger. He thought about the kind of man who would drive a woman to flee into the desert alone, and the anger that had stirred in him earlier came back, stronger this time. He had been raised to believe that a man protected those weaker than himself, especially women and children. His father had drilled that into him from the time he was old enough to understand. A real man used his strength to shelter others, not to dominate them. Whatever had happened to Rebecca, Cade was determined to keep her safe while she recovered. After that, well, they would see what needed to be done. The next morning, Cade was up before dawn as usual, but he moved quietly through the house, not wanting to disturb Rebecca. He helped the hands with the morning chores, his mind only half on the work as he wondered how she was doing. When he finally came back to the house for breakfast, he found Rosa in the kitchen, preparing a tray. "She is awake," Rosa informed him, "and asking for you." Cade washed up quickly at the basin and ran his fingers through his hair, suddenly aware that he probably looked and smelled like he had been working cattle all morning. But Rosa was already heading toward the bedroom with the tray, and he followed. Rebecca was sitting up in bed, propped against pillows, and someone, probably Rosa, had found her a clean nightgown to wear. Her dark hair had been brushed and braided, and the color had returned to her cheeks. She looked better, though the sadness Rosa had mentioned was still there in her eyes, a deep weariness that made her seem older than her years. "Good morning," Cade said from the doorway, not wanting to intrude too far into what was, technically, his own bedroom. "How are you feeling?" "Better," Rebecca replied, her voice still slightly hoarse but much improved from the day before. "Thanks to you and Rosa, I owe you my life." "You do not owe me anything," Cade said firmly. "I only did what anyone would do." Rebecca's smile was bitter. "Not anyone. There are plenty who would have left me there or worse." Rosa set the tray across Rebecca's lap and bustled out, closing the door most of the way but not completely. Cade appreciated her discretion, knowing she was protecting Rebecca's reputation while still giving them privacy to talk. "Do you feel up to telling me what happened?" Cade asked gently. "You do not have to if you are not ready, but it might help to talk about it." Rebecca looked down at the tray, at the eggs and toast and fruit Rosa had prepared, and for a long moment, Cade thought she might refuse. But then she started talking, her voice quiet but steady. "I was engaged to a man named Charles Thornton," she began. "He is a banker in San Francisco, very wealthy and well-connected. My father arranged the marriage. My father is also a banker, you see, and he thought it would be a good alliance for the family." Cade pulled up a chair and sat down, listening intently. "I did not love Charles," Rebecca continued, "but I thought I could learn to. He was charming when he wanted to be, attentive during our courtship. But after we were engaged, things started to change. He became possessive, controlling. He did not like me speaking to other men, did not like me having my own opinions. But I told myself it would be fine. I told myself that this was just how marriage was." Her hands were trembling now, and she set down the fork she had been holding. "The wedding was planned for early August. It was going to be a grand affair, with hundreds of guests. I tried to be excited about it, tried to be the happy bride everyone expected me to be. But a week before the ceremony, I overheard Charles talking to one of his friends. He was bragging about how he was going to tame me once we were married, how he would break me of my willful ways. And his friend laughed and said that a good beating now and then would do the trick." Cade felt his jaw clench, but he said nothing, letting her continue. "I confronted Charles that night," Rebecca said. "I told him I could not marry him, that I was calling off the wedding. He was furious. He grabbed me, shook me, told me that I belonged to him and that I would do as I was told. When I tried to leave, he hit me. It was the first time, but I knew it would not be the last." "What did you do?" Cade asked quietly. "I ran. I locked myself in my room and climbed out the window. I did not even pack a bag. I just ran. I made it to the train station and used the little money I had hidden away to buy a ticket as far as it would take me. I ended up in San Bernardino 2 days ago. I was staying at a boarding house, trying to figure out what to do next, when Charles found me." "He followed you all the way from San Francisco." "He had hired men to track me down," Rebecca said. "Private detectives. They found me at the boarding house on the morning of what was supposed to be our wedding day. Charles was with them. He said we were getting married right then and there, that he had paid the local minister to perform the ceremony. I was so scared, I just went along with it. I thought maybe if I cooperated, I could find a way to escape later." She pulled the gold band off her finger and stared at it with disgust. "The ceremony was quick. Charles put this ring on my finger and the minister pronounced us man and wife. Then Charles said we were leaving immediately for San Francisco, that he had a carriage waiting. But when we got outside, I saw that he had been drinking. His breath reeked of whiskey and his eyes were wild. I knew that if I got in that carriage with him, I would never have another chance to get away. "So you ran again," Kade said. "I ran. He chased me. I tore my dress climbing over a fence, lost my shoes somewhere along the way. I could hear him behind me, shouting that I was his wife now and that he would punish me for this. But then I made it past the edge of town, and the terrain got rougher. He was too drunk to keep up, and eventually I lost him. I just kept going, not knowing where I was headed, just knowing I had to get as far away as possible." Tears were streaming down her face now, and Kade reached over to take her hand. "You are safe here," he said firmly. "I promise you that. He will not get to you while you are under my roof." Rebecca looked at him with something like wonder in her eyes. "Why are you doing this? You do not even know me." "Because it is the right thing to do," Kade replied simply. "And because no man has the right to treat a woman the way he treated you, husband or not." "But I am married to him," Rebecca said miserably. "In the eyes of the law, I belong to him. He can drag me back to San Francisco, and there is nothing anyone can do about it." Kade was quiet for a moment, thinking. "Did you want to marry him? When you stood there with the minister, did you consent freely?" "I was terrified. I only went through with it because I thought he would hurt me if I refused, or worse, hurt the landlady at the boarding house for hiding me." "Then it seems to me that marriage was made under duress," Kade said. "Which might make it invalid, but I am not a lawyer. We should talk to one." "I have no money," Rebecca said. "Nothing. Everything I had, Charles took from me." "You let me worry about that," Kade said. "Right now, you need to focus on getting better. Eat your breakfast, rest, and do not worry about anything else." Over the next few days, Rebecca slowly regained her strength. Rosa doted on her, bringing her meals and sitting with her in the afternoons, telling her stories about the ranch and the people who worked there. Kade checked on her regularly, but was careful not to overstay his welcome, aware that she might still be wary of men after what she had been through. He had moved his things to a small room off the kitchen, insisting that Rebecca keep the main bedroom for as long as she needed it. On the fourth day, Rebecca felt well enough to get out of bed and move around the house. Rosa had found her some simple dresses that had belonged to Miguel's daughter, who had grown up and moved to Los Angeles. They were a bit loose on Rebecca's slender frame, but they were clean and comfortable, a far cry from the ruined wedding dress that Rosa had discreetly burned. That evening, Kade found Rebecca sitting on the front porch, watching the sunset paint the desert sky in shades of orange and pink. He hesitated, not wanting to disturb her peace, but she turned and smiled at him, a real smile this time, not the sad, broken thing it had been before. "It is beautiful here," she said. "So different from San Francisco. Everything there is crowded and noisy. Here there is space to breathe." Kade sat down in the chair next to her. "It grows on you. When I first came here as a boy, I thought it was the loneliest place on earth. But over time, I learned to love the silence, the way you can see for miles in every direction." "Your father homesteaded here?" Rebecca asked. "He did. Came out from Missouri after the war. He wanted a fresh start, someplace where the past did not matter as much as what you could build for the future. He worked this land until the day he died, and now I am doing the same." "Do you have any other family? A sister?" "She married a shopkeeper in Los Angeles. They have 3 children. I do not see them as often as I would like, but we write letters." He paused. "What about you? Besides your father, do you have other family?" Rebecca's expression clouded. "My mother died when I was 16. I have 2 younger brothers, but they are away at school back east. My father, well, I do not think he will forgive me for running away from the marriage he arranged. In his eyes, I have disgraced the family name." "That is his failing, not yours," Kade said firmly. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the light fade from the sky and the first stars appear. Then Rebecca spoke again, her voice so soft he almost did not hear her. "Can I tell you something? Anything? When I was running through the desert, when I thought I was going to die out there, I realized something. I realized that I had spent my entire life doing what other people wanted me to do. I went to the finishing school my father chose. I wore the clothes he approved of. I agreed to marry the man he selected. I never once asked myself what I wanted, what I dreamed of. And somewhere along the way, I stopped dreaming altogether." She turned to look at him, and in the fading light, he could see tears glistening in her eyes. "I forgot what hoping felt like," she whispered. "I forgot that life could be anything other than obligation and duty. And that is the saddest thing of all, is it not? To be so beaten down that you forget how to hope." Kade felt something shift in his chest, a feeling he had not experienced in a long time. He reached over and took her hand, holding it gently in his own. "Then maybe it is time you remembered," he said. "Maybe it is time you figured out what you want, what your dreams are. And maybe, while you are here, you can start to find those dreams again." Rebecca squeezed his hand, and for the first time since he had found her in the desert, he saw something other than sadness in her eyes. He saw a glimmer of hope, fragile as a candle flame in the wind, but there nonetheless. The next week brought changes to the ranch. Kade had sent word to a lawyer he knew in Los Angeles, a man named Preston, who had helped him with some land disputes in the past. Preston agreed to come out to the ranch to discuss Rebecca's situation, and he arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, dusty from the road but sharp-eyed and attentive as Rebecca told him her story. After hearing everything, Preston leaned back in his chair and stroked his beard thoughtfully. "It is a complicated situation," he admitted. "The law is not kind to women in these matters, as I am sure you know. However, the fact that the marriage was performed under duress, with threats of violence, does give us some ground to stand on. If we can prove that you were coerced, we might be able to get the marriage annulled." "What would we need to prove that?" Rebecca asked. "Witnesses, ideally. Anyone who saw or heard your husband threaten you, documentation of any injuries. Testimony from credible individuals about your state of mind." Preston looked at Kade. "Your testimony about finding her in the desert in the condition she was in would carry weight." "You will have it," Kade said immediately. "There is another complication," Preston continued. "This Charles Thornton is a wealthy man with connections. If he decides to fight this, he can make things very difficult. He could claim that you are the one in the wrong, that you abandoned your marital duties. He could try to have you brought back to San Francisco by force. So what do we do?" Kade asked. "We file for the annulment as quickly as possible, and we do it here in California, where we have more control over the proceedings. In the meantime, Mrs. Winters, or Miss Winters if you prefer, should stay somewhere safe where Thornton cannot find her easily." Preston looked around the ranch. "This place seems isolated enough, but if Thornton is determined, he might eventually track her here." "Let him try," Kade said, his voice hard. "He will not take her." Preston raised an eyebrow but said nothing. He spent the rest of the afternoon drawing up papers and making notes, and by the time he left, he had everything he needed to start the legal process. After Preston's departure, the ranch settled back into its routine. Rebecca began to take on small tasks around the house, helping Rosa with cooking and mending. She had a natural grace and a quick mind, and she proved adept at everything she tried. Kade found himself watching her more and more, captivated by the way she moved, the sound of her laugh when Rosa told a particularly funny story, the concentration on her face when she was working on some task. He tried to tell himself it was just concern for her welfare, that he was simply being protective of someone in need. But he knew, deep down, that it was more than that. He was falling for her, falling hard, and the realization both thrilled and terrified him. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after Rebecca's arrival, Kade was working in the corral with a young stallion that needed breaking. The horse was spirited and strong, and it took all of Kade's skill to stay in the saddle as the animal bucked and twisted, trying to throw him. He was so focused on the task at hand that he did not notice Rebecca watching from the fence until he finally got the horse calmed down and trotting smoothly around the corral. "That was amazing," Rebecca said, her eyes bright with admiration. "I have never seen anyone ride like that." Kade felt his face heat up, unaccustomed to such direct praise. "It is just part of the work," he said, dismounting and leading the horse over to where she stood. "This fellow is going to make someone a fine mount once he learns some manners." Rebecca reached out tentatively to stroke the horse's nose, and the animal nuzzled her hand gently. "He is beautiful. What is his name?" "I have been calling him Storm on account of his temperament." "Storm," Rebecca repeated, smiling. "It suits him." They stood there for a moment, the horse between them, and Kade found himself acutely aware of how close she was, how the sun caught the gold highlights in her dark hair, how her eyes seemed to reflect the blue of the desert sky. "Would you like to learn to ride?" he asked suddenly. "I could teach you if you are interested." Rebecca's face lit up. "Really? I have always wanted to learn, but my father said it was not ladylike. He said proper young women rode in carriages, not on horseback." "Well, your father is not here," Kade said, more sharply than he intended. He softened his tone. "Out here, knowing how to ride is not just useful, it could save your life. If you are going to be staying in California, you should know how to handle a horse." "Then yes," Rebecca said, "I would love to learn." They started the next morning, with Kade bringing out a gentle mare named Daisy who was patient with beginners. He showed Rebecca how to approach the horse, how to speak softly and move calmly so as not to spook her. He taught her how to saddle Daisy, explaining each piece of tack and its purpose. Rebecca listened intently, asking intelligent questions and remembering everything he told her. When it came time for her to actually mount the horse, Kade stood close, ready to catch her if she fell. She placed her foot in the stirrup and pulled herself up with more grace than he expected, settling into the saddle and taking up the reins as he had shown her. "How does it feel?" he asked, looking up at her. "Wonderful," Rebecca breathed, her face glowing with excitement. "I feel like I could fly." Over the next few weeks, the riding lessons became a regular part of their routine. Every morning, weather permitting, Kade and Rebecca would ride out together, sometimes staying close to the ranch, other times venturing farther afield. He showed her the boundaries of his property, pointed out the water sources and the best grazing areas, taught her to read the land the way his father had taught him. And as they rode, they talked. Rebecca told him about her childhood in San Francisco, about the mother she had lost too young and the father who had never understood her. She talked about the books she loved to read, the places she dreamed of seeing, the person she wanted to become. And Kade found himself opening up to her in ways he never had with anyone else, sharing his own dreams and fears, his hopes for the future of the ranch, his memories of his father and the lessons he had learned. One morning, they rode out to a place Kade particularly loved, a small canyon where a spring bubbled up from the rocks, creating a pool of clear, cold water surrounded by cottonwood trees. It was an oasis in the desert, a secret place where the harsh reality of the land gave way to something gentler and more beautiful. Rebecca slid down from her horse and walked to the edge of the pool, gazing at her reflection in the water. "This is incredible," she said softly. It is like something from a dream. Kade dismounted and joined her, standing close enough that their shoulders almost touched. My father showed me this place when I was a boy. He said that even in the hardest, most barren places, if you look hard enough, you can find beauty. You just have to know where to look. Rebecca turned to face him, and he was struck by how much she had changed in the weeks since he had found her. The fear and exhaustion were gone, replaced by a quiet confidence and a vitality that seemed to radiate from her. She was beautiful, but it was more than that. She was alive in a way she had not been before, and he realized that this was what hope looked like. "Kade," she said, and the way she spoke his name made his heart race. "I want to thank you. Not just for saving my life, but for giving me a reason to live it. For reminding me that there is more to life than fear and obligation. You have given me back my dreams." He reached out and cupped her face in his hand, his thumb gently stroking her cheek. "You did that yourself," he said. "I just provided a safe place for you to remember who you are." They stood there, the desert sun warm on their shoulders, the sound of the spring bubbling behind them, and Kade knew that he was going to kiss her. He could see in her eyes that she wanted it too, that whatever was growing between them was mutual and real and worth fighting for. But before he could close the distance between them, they heard the sound of horses approaching fast. Kade's hand dropped to the gun at his hip, a reflexive gesture born of years of living in a land where danger could appear without warning. Rebecca stepped closer to him, fear flickering across her face. Dutch burst through the trees on horseback, his face urgent. "Boss, we have got company at the ranch, a group of men asking about a woman. They are saying they are looking for Mrs. Charles Thornton." Kade felt Rebecca stiffen beside him. "How many men?" he asked sharply. "4. Rough-looking types. They are not wearing badges, but they are armed." Dutch's eyes flicked to Rebecca. "I told them I did not know anything about any woman, but they are not looking like they believe me." "We need to get back," Kade said. He turned to Rebecca. "Stay close to me. Do not say anything. Do not let them see your face if you can help it." They rode back to the ranch at a gallop, and Kade's mind was racing. If these were men hired by Charles Thornton, they were not bound by any legal constraints. They could try to take Rebecca by force, and out here, far from any town or authority, there would be no one to stop them except Kade and his men. When they reached the ranch, Kade saw the 4 strangers standing in the yard, their horses tied to the rail. They were indeed rough-looking, the kind of men who would do anything for money. One of them, a tall man with a scar across his cheek, seemed to be the leader. He looked up as Kade rode in, his eyes narrowing. "Are you Ryerson?" the scarred man asked. "I am. This is my ranch. What can I do for you?" Kade kept his voice level, but his hand stayed near his gun. "We are looking for a woman, Rebecca Winters. She is married to our employer, Mr. Charles Thornton, and she ran away from him. We have reason to believe she might be in this area." "I have not seen anyone matching that description," Kade said. He dismounted, positioning himself between the men and Rebecca, who had pulled her hat low over her face. "This is cattle country. We do not get many visitors out here." The scarred man looked skeptical. "Mr. Thornton is offering a substantial reward for information leading to his wife's return. $500. That is a lot of money for a cattleman." "It is," Kade agreed, "but I cannot give you information I do not have." One of the other men, a shorter, stockier fellow with mean eyes, spoke up. "Who is that?" He pointed at Rebecca. "One of my hands," Kade said smoothly. "Been working here for years." "Funny-looking hand," the man said. "A bit small for ranch work." "I do not recall asking for your opinion on how I run my ranch," Kade said, his voice going cold. The scarred man held up a hand. "Easy now. We are not looking for trouble. We are just trying to find Mrs. Thornton. Her husband is very worried about her." "I am sure he is," Kade said dryly. But as I said, I have not seen her. Now, if you gentlemen will excuse me, we have work to do." The four men exchanged glances, clearly unhappy with this answer, but they were outnumbered. Cade's ranch hands had gathered in the yard, drawn by the commotion, and they stood in a loose semicircle, hands near their weapons, faces grim. The message was clear. The strangers were not welcome here. "We will be back," the scarred man said finally. "Mr. Thornton is not going to give up. He wants his wife back, and he will do whatever it takes to get her. Then I suggest he learn to treat her better so she does not feel the need to run away," Cade replied. The scarred man's face darkened, but he motioned to his companions, and they mounted up. They rode out slowly, and Cade watched them go, his jaw tight. He did not relax until they were out of sight. Rebecca had dismounted and was standing with Rosa, who had come out of the house at the first sign of trouble. Her face was pale and she was trembling. Cade went to her immediately. "They will be back," she said, her voice shaking. "Charles will not give up. He will keep sending men until he finds me. Then we will be ready for them," Cade said. He looked at Dutch and the other hands. "I want a watch set up day and night. Anyone approaches the ranch, I want to know about it immediately. Nobody gets to this house without going through us first." The men nodded, and Dutch began organizing shifts. Rosa put her arm around Rebecca and led her back into the house, murmuring soothing words in Spanish. That night, Cade sat on the porch long after everyone else had gone to bed, his rifle across his lap, watching the darkness. He had meant every word he said. He would protect Rebecca, no matter what it took. She had come to mean more to him than he had thought possible in such a short time. She was not just a woman in need of help anymore. She was someone he cared about deeply, someone he could see building a future with. But first, they had to deal with Charles Thornton and his hired men. And Cade had a feeling that the confrontation, when it came, would not be a peaceful one. The next few days were tense. The ranch hands remained on alert, and Rebecca stayed close to the house, no longer venturing out for their morning rides. Cade hated seeing her trapped again, her freedom curtailed by fear, but he knew it was necessary until they could resolve the situation with Thornton. Word came from Preston, the lawyer, that he had filed the annulment papers, but the process would take time. In the meantime, Thornton had filed a counterclaim, arguing that Rebecca was his legal wife and that she was being held against her will. Preston assured them that the law was on their side, but the wheels of justice turned slowly, especially when one party had wealth and influence. It was a Thursday afternoon when things came to a head. Cade was in the barn, checking on a horse that had thrown a shoe, when he heard Dutch shout from outside. He grabbed his rifle and ran out to find a much larger group of men riding toward the ranch. He counted quickly. 10 men, all armed, and leading them was a man in expensive Eastern clothes who could only be Charles Thornton. Cade's hands tightened on his rifle as he stepped into the yard. His ranch hands had already assembled, creating a barrier between the approaching men and the house. He could see Rosa through the window, pulling Rebecca away from sight. Thornton reined in his horse about 20 feet from Cade, a sneer on his handsome face. He was younger than Cade had expected, probably only 26 or 27, with slicked-back blonde hair and cold blue eyes. He looked like someone who had never been told no in his entire life. "Are you Ryerson?" Thornton demanded. "I am. I am Charles Thornton. I believe you are harboring my wife, and I am here to take her home." "I am not harboring anyone," Cade replied, his voice steady. "And from what I understand, the lady in question does not wish to go with you." "What she wishes is irrelevant," Thornton snapped. "She is my wife. She belongs to me. Now bring her out here, or I will have my men tear this place apart until we find her." "You will do no such thing," Cade said, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. This is my land and you have no authority here. If you try to set foot in that house, you will be met with force." Thornton laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You are outnumbered, Cowboy. You and your pathetic little crew against my men. Do you really think you can stop us?" "I think you will lose more men than you are willing to sacrifice," Kade said. "And I think that when word gets out that you attacked a ranch and tried to kidnap a woman, your reputation in San Francisco will be worth less than dirt. She is not being kidnapped. She is my wife. A marriage performed under duress is not valid," Kade shot back. "Papers have been filed for an annulment. If you are so certain of your legal rights, you can wait for the courts to decide. But you will not take her from here." Thornton's face flushed with rage. "I have had enough of this. Men, go into that house and bring Rebecca out here. Kill anyone who tries to stop you." For a moment, everyone froze. Then Thornton's men began to dismount, drawing their weapons. Kade raised his rifle and his ranch hands did the same. The air crackled with tension, and Kade knew that in seconds, bullets would start flying. But before the first shot could be fired, another voice rang out from the house. "Stop!" Everyone turned to see Rebecca standing on the porch, her face pale but determined. She walked down the steps and into the yard, ignoring Rosa's frantic protests from the doorway. "Rebecca, get back inside," Kade said urgently. But Rebecca ignored him, walking steadily until she stood between the two groups of armed men. She turned to face Charles Thornton, and though her hands were trembling, her voice was strong. "You want me, Charles? Fine, I will come with you. But only if you call off your men and promise that no one here will be harmed." "No," Kade said immediately. "Rebecca, you are not going anywhere with him." She turned to look at Kade, and he saw the tears in her eyes. "I will not let people die because of me. I will not let you die because of me." "How touching," Thornton said mockingly. "The little whore has found herself a protector. Tell me, Rebecca, have you been warming his bed? Is that why he is so eager to defend you?" Kade took a step forward, his finger tightening on the trigger, but Rebecca held up a hand. "Do not," she said quietly, and he forced himself to stop, though every instinct was screaming at him to put a bullet in Thornton right then and there. Rebecca turned back to Thornton. "I will come with you," she repeated, "but I want your word that you will leave these people alone." "You are in no position to negotiate," Thornton said, "but fine. You come quietly and I will leave your cowboy and his men alive." "Do not do this," Kade said desperately. "Rebecca, please." She looked at him one more time, and the love in her eyes nearly broke him. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything. For reminding me what hope feels like. I will never forget you." She walked toward Thornton's horse, her head held high, and Kade felt something inside him shatter. He could not let this happen. He could not let her go back to a life of fear and pain with a man who would hurt her. He would rather die fighting than watch her ride away. He was about to raise his rifle again, consequences be damned, when the sound of multiple horses approaching fast made everyone turn. A group of riders was thundering toward the ranch from the direction of San Bernardino, and as they got closer, Kade saw the glint of badges. The sheriff and a posse of at least 8 men. Sheriff Daniels was a no-nonsense lawman in his 50s, with a weather-beaten face and sharp eyes. He reined in his horse at the edge of the standoff, taking in the scene with a single sweeping glance. "What in the hell is going on here?" he demanded. "This does not concern you, Sheriff," Thornton said. "This is a domestic matter. I am simply retrieving my wife." "That is funny," Sheriff Daniels said, pulling a folded paper from his pocket. "Because I have a court order here that says this woman is under the protection of the law pending an annulment hearing. It also says that one Charles Thornton is to stay at least 100 yards away from her at all times or face arrest." Thornton's face went from flushed to pale. "That is impossible. I did not receive any notice." Well, you are receiving it now, the sheriff said. He looked at his men. Anyone who does not lower their weapon in the next 5 seconds will be arrested for attempted kidnapping and assault. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, Thornton's men began to holster their guns and step back. They were hired muscle, not soldiers willing to die for their employer. "This is an outrage," Thornton sputtered. "That woman is my wife. I have rights." "And she has the right to due process," Sheriff Daniels said. "The court will decide the validity of your marriage. Until then, you stay away from her. Am I clear?" Thornton looked like he wanted to argue further, but the number of armed lawmen surrounding him made the foolishness of that clear. He yanked his horse's reins, turning the animal in a tight circle. "This is not over," he said, glaring at Rebecca and then at Kade. "I will fight this in every court in California if I have to. You are my wife, Rebecca, and you will come home." "I am not your wife," Rebecca said, her voice clear and strong. "I was never your wife. You do not marry someone you terrorize. You do not love someone you try to control." "Whatever ceremony was performed, it meant nothing because I did not give my consent freely. And I never will." Thornton spurred his horse and rode off, his men following. Kade watched them go, his heart still pounding, his hands shaking slightly from the adrenaline. He turned to Sheriff Daniels. "Thank you," he said. "How did you know to come?" "Your lawyer, Preston, sent word to my office. He figured Thornton might try something and asked me to keep an eye on things. I got here as fast as I could." The sheriff looked at Rebecca. "Madam, you are welcome to stay here as long as you need to, and I will make sure Thornton and his men leave the area. But I would advise you to stay close to the ranch until the hearing. Men like Thornton do not give up easily." "I understand," Rebecca said. "Thank you, Sheriff." After the lawman left, Rebecca's legs finally gave out and Kade caught her before she could fall. He carried her into the house and set her gently on the sofa, kneeling beside her. "You should not have done that," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You should not have offered to go with him." "I could not let him hurt you," Rebecca said, tears streaming down her face. "I could not let you die for me." "And I cannot let you sacrifice yourself for me," Kade replied. He took her hands in his, holding them tightly. "Rebecca, listen to me. I do not know when it happened, but somewhere between finding you in the desert and today, I fell in love with you. And I know this is fast. I know we have only known each other a few weeks, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you. And I will fight for you, die for you if I have to, because a life without you is not worth living." Rebecca sobbed, pulling her hands free to cup his face. "I love you too. I think I have loved you since that first day when you promised me I was safe. You made me believe in hope again. You made me believe in myself, and I do not want to imagine my life without you in it." Kade pulled her into his arms, holding her as she cried, and he felt his own tears sliding down his cheeks. They stayed like that for a long time, drawing strength from each other, until finally Rebecca pulled back and looked at him. "What do we do now?" she asked. "We wait for the hearing," Kade said. "And we trust that the law will do the right thing, and in the meantime we live our lives. We do not let Thornton take any more from us than he already has." The hearing took place 6 weeks later in Los Angeles. Preston had built a strong case, with testimony from the boarding house landlady who had witnessed Thornton's threats, from Rosa and Dutch about the condition Rebecca was in when Kade found her, and from Rebecca herself, who spoke eloquently about the fear and coercion she had experienced. Thornton's lawyers tried to paint her as a runaway wife, as someone who had made vows and then broken them, but the judge, a stern woman in her 60s who had seen her share of domestic cases, was not swayed. The marriage was annulled. The judge declared that consent given under duress was not true consent, and that the union was invalid from the start. Thornton was ordered to stay away from Rebecca permanently, and when he tried to argue, the judge threatened him with contempt. Kade and Rebecca walked out of the courthouse hand in hand, and for the first time in months, Rebecca felt truly free. She tilted her face to the sky, feeling the California sun warm on her skin, and laughed with pure joy. "It is over," she said. "It is really over." "It is," Kade agreed, pulling her close and kissing her right there on the courthouse steps, not caring who saw. "And now our life together can really begin." They were married 3 months later in the small church in San Bernardino. It was a simple ceremony, nothing like the grand affair that had been planned with Thornton. Rebecca wore a dress Rosa had sewn for her, pale blue with white lace, and she carried wildflowers Kade had picked that morning. Dutch served as best man, and Rosa and Miguel stood up as witnesses. The small church was filled with ranch hands and neighbors, people who had come to respect and care for the couple. As Kade slipped the ring onto Rebecca's finger, a new ring to replace the one she had thrown in the desert months ago, she looked into his eyes and saw her entire future reflected there. A future of love and partnership, of building something together in this harsh but beautiful land. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," he replied. "Always." The years that followed were filled with the kind of happiness Rebecca had never dared to dream of. She and Kade worked side by side to build the ranch into something prosperous and sustainable. She proved to have a head for numbers and took over managing the books, freeing Kade to focus on the livestock and land management. They built a partnership that was equal and respectful, each valuing the other's contributions. 2 years after their wedding, Rebecca gave birth to their first child, a son they named Samuel after Kade's father. He had his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes, and from the moment he entered the world, he was the light of their lives. 3 years later, they had a daughter, Lily, who was as spirited as her mother and as stubborn as her father. Rebecca often thought back to that day in the desert when Kade had found her, broken and hopeless, convinced that her life was over. She thought about the woman she had been then, who had forgotten how to hope, who had believed that her dreams were dead. And she marveled at how much could change, how one act of kindness could alter the entire trajectory of a life. She wrote letters to her brothers, who had reached out after hearing about her annulment and remarriage, horrified by what their father had tried to force her into. They visited when they could, and she was able to rebuild those relationships. Her father never reached out, and she made peace with that. Some people could not be changed, could not see past their own pride and expectations. But she had her own family now, one built on love and mutual respect. Charles Thornton faded into memory, a bad dream that lost its power over time. She heard through the grapevine that he had eventually remarried, some poor woman from Boston, and she prayed that woman was stronger than she had been, strong enough to stand up to him or leave him if necessary. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Kade took Rebecca back to the spring in the canyon, the place where they had almost shared their first kiss before being interrupted by news of Thornton's arrival. They left the children with Rosa and Miguel for the afternoon and rode out together, just the two of them, the way they used to in those early days. They sat by the water, hands clasped, watching the sunlight dance on the surface of the pool. Rebecca leaned her head on Kade's shoulder, feeling utterly content. "You ever regret it?" Kade asked suddenly. "Giving up the life you could have had in San Francisco? The society, the culture, the ease of city living?" Rebecca laughed softly. "Not for a single moment. This is the life I was meant to have. You are the man I was meant to love. Everything that happened, as terrible as it was, led me here, led me to you, and I would not change that for anything in the world. Kade kissed the top of her head. I found you half dead in the desert and you ended up saving me. How did I save you? Rebecca asked, curious. I was lonely, Kade admitted. I did not realize how lonely until you came into my life. I had the ranch, I had my work, but I did not have anyone to share it with. You gave me that. You gave me a partner, a family, a reason to build something that would outlast us both. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, and then Rebecca spoke again. Do you remember what I told you that night on the porch when I said I had forgotten what hoping felt like? I remember. I want you to know that you gave that back to me. You gave me back my ability to hope, to dream, to believe in the possibility of happiness. And every day since then, you have made those dreams come true. Kade turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. You made my dreams come true too. I used to think success meant a profitable ranch and a good reputation. But you taught me that real success is measured in moments like this, in the love of a good woman, in the laughter of children, in building a life that matters. As they rode back to the ranch that evening, the sky painted in brilliant shades of orange and pink, Rebecca felt a profound sense of gratitude. She had been through darkness and despair, had nearly lost everything including her life. But she had been given a second chance, a new beginning in the sheltering arms of a good man. The ranch came into view, with its sturdy adobe buildings and neat corrals, and she could see Samuel and Lily running out to meet them, their excited shouts carrying on the desert air. Rosa stood on the porch, waving, and Dutch was leading a new horse into the barn. This was home. This was family. This was the life she had fought so hard for, the dream she had reclaimed from the ashes of her past. And as Kade reached over to take her hand as they rode, their fingers intertwining in the familiar gesture that had become second nature, Rebecca knew that her story, which had begun in terror and desperation, had transformed into something beautiful, something worth telling. She had learned that hope was not something you found once and kept forever. It was something you chose every day, even when the world seemed dark. It was something you built, brick by brick, moment by moment, with the help of people who loved you. And she had learned that love, real love, was not about possession or control. It was about freedom and trust, about two people choosing each other every single day, building something together that neither could create alone. The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own joys and challenges. The ranch prospered, becoming known throughout the region for its quality livestock and fair dealings. Kade earned a reputation as a man of integrity, and Rebecca became known for her kindness and business acumen. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, market fluctuations and difficult seasons, but they weathered them together. When Samuel turned 18, he took on more responsibility at the ranch, showing the same natural ability with horses and cattle that his father possessed. Lily proved to be academically gifted, and Kade and Rebecca scraped together the money to send her to a teaching college in Los Angeles, wanting her to have opportunities that Rebecca had never had growing up. Their family grew in other ways too. Rosa and Miguel had grandchildren who played in the ranch yard with Samuel and Lily when they were young. Dutch eventually married a widow from town, and they built a small house on the ranch property. The ranch became not just a business but a community, a place where people looked out for each other and worked together toward common goals. Rebecca never stopped being grateful for the life she had built. She kept a journal, writing down her thoughts and memories, wanting to preserve the story of how she had gone from a terrified bride running for her life to a woman who had found her purpose and her place in the world. She wrote it all down so that her children and grandchildren would know that even in the darkest moments, there was always the possibility of hope, always the chance for a new beginning. On the night of their 20th anniversary, after a celebration dinner with family and friends, Kade and Rebecca stood on the porch of their home, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. The desert was cooling after the heat of the day, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of sage and dust. 20 years, Rebecca marveled. It seems like yesterday and it seems like a lifetime. Both, Kade agreed. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, and she leaned back against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her back. If I could go back and tell that frightened woman in the desert what her life would become, she would not have believed me, Rebecca said softly. But she would have hoped, Kade replied, because that is who you are, Rebecca. Even when you thought you had forgotten how to hope, it was still there inside you, waiting to be rekindled. You were the spark, Rebecca said, turning in his arms to face him. You were the light that guided me out of the darkness. And you were the reason I finally understood what it meant to truly live, Kade said. To not just exist, but to thrive. To not just work, but to love. They kissed under the stars, and it was the same as it had been 20 years ago and yet different, deepened by time and shared experience, by all the moments they had lived through together. As the years progressed further, Rebecca and Kade had the joy of becoming grandparents. Samuel married a schoolteacher named Margaret, and they had 3 children who loved visiting the ranch and learning the ways of the land from their grandfather. Lily returned from teaching college and opened a school in San Bernardino, eventually marrying a lawyer who reminded Rebecca, in all the best ways, of Preston, who had helped her gain her freedom all those years ago. Rebecca's health remained good well into her 60s, and she continued to be actively involved in running the ranch. She and Kade worked together as seamlessly as they always had, their partnership strong and unshakable. They had weathered everything life threw at them together, and their love had only grown stronger with time. On a cool spring morning when Rebecca was 68 and Kade was 75, they took their traditional ride out to the spring in the canyon. It had become a yearly pilgrimage, a way to mark their anniversary and remember the journey they had taken together. As they sat by the water, hand in hand as always, Rebecca reflected on the extraordinary life they had built together. She thought about that desperate woman running through the desert in a torn wedding dress, about the kind cowboy who had stopped to help a stranger in need. She thought about how a single act of compassion had set in motion a chain of events that had led to decades of happiness. "I love you," she said to Kade, the words as heartfelt as the first time she had spoken them. "I love you too," he replied. "Always have, always will." They stayed at the spring for hours, talking about their children and grandchildren, about the ranch and its future, about the memories they had made and the blessings they had received. And when they finally mounted their horses to head home, Rebecca took one last look at the spring, at the place that had become so significant in their story, and silently gave thanks for every moment of the life she had been given. The ranch remained in the family for generations. Samuel's children took over its management, maintaining the traditions and values that Kade and Rebecca had established. The story of how Rebecca came to the ranch, how she was sheltered by a cowboy and found love in the midst of darkness, became family legend, passed down to each new generation. And though Rebecca and Kade eventually passed on, as all people must, their legacy lived on in the lives they had touched, in the family they had created, in the land they had nurtured. Their love story became a testament to the power of compassion, the resilience of the human spirit, and the transformative nature of hope. Years later, when Rebecca's great-granddaughter found her journal tucked away in the attic of the old ranch house, she sat down and read the entire thing in one sitting, tears streaming down her face. She read about the terror and the escape, about the cowboy who had offered shelter without expecting anything in return, about the slow building of trust and love, about the fight for freedom and the joy of finally being able to choose one's own path. And at the very end of the journal, on the last page, written in Rebecca's elegant handwriting, was a final entry dated just a few months before her death. It read, "If anyone should find this and read my story, I hope they take away this truth. It is never too late to choose hope. It is never too late to choose love. It is never too late to choose yourself. I was a frightened bride who had forgotten what hoping felt like, and I became a woman who understood that hope is not just a feeling but a choice, one we make every single day. I was sheltered by a cowboy who expected nothing in return, and I found in him a partner who taught me that real love liberates rather than imprisons. My life did not begin the day I was born. It began the day I chose to run toward freedom, and it was made complete the day I found a man who helped me remember who I was meant to be. May everyone be so blessed." The great-granddaughter closed the journal carefully, her heart full of emotion. She looked out the window at the desert landscape, at the ranch that had been in her family for over a century, and she felt connected to Rebecca in a profound way. She understood now where she came from, the strength that ran in her blood, the legacy of love and courage that was her inheritance. And somewhere, in whatever place exists beyond this life, Rebecca and Kade were together still. Their souls intertwined as they had been for so many years, their love a testament to the truth that even in the darkest wilderness, hope can be found, and even the most broken heart can be made whole again. The ranch continued to thrive, generation after generation, each one adding their own chapter to the story while honoring the foundation that had been laid by Rebecca and Kade. The spring in the canyon remained a special place, where family members went to remember the couple who had started it all, to feel connected to their history, to draw strength from the legacy of love. And in San Bernardino, there was a small historical marker placed by the family, commemorating the ranch and the remarkable woman who had helped build it. The marker told a brief version of the story, how a desperate bride had been sheltered by a compassionate cowboy, how love had bloomed in the desert, how hope had been reclaimed from the ashes of despair. Tourists sometimes stopped to read the marker, and locals told the story to their children, and Rebecca's journey from victim to victor, from prisoner to free woman, from despair to hope, became part of the fabric of the region's history. It was a story that mattered. It was a story that endured. And it was a story that reminded everyone who heard it that courage can be found in the most unlikely places, that love can heal even the deepest wounds, and that it is never, ever too late to remember what hoping feels like. The end.